Now, as we continue to experience ongoing power cuts, we ask the questions, how can community members find solutions to fight energy crisis in their townships? Let's unpack this with Professor Luke Sinwell, who is a project coordinator at the Centre for Sociological Research and Practice. Thank you so much for your time, Prof. We do appreciate it. It seems as though we just keep having this conversation time and time again about what we can do about our electricity crisis, and those affected on the ground seem to be much more poorer communities and those that are more vulnerable. How dire is the situation before we get into some of the solutions?
Well, recently, this week, there was a series of very unfortunate events that unfolded in Soweto, in Sun Valley, where our team at UJ has done extensive research, especially last year, but continuing into this year, and where there have been cutoffs like there are oftentimes in Black informal settlements as well as townships. But there was a conflict between this group of people living in Pimville and those living in the informal settlement, Cliptown, in a specific area called Chicken Farm. And first of all, I'd just like to give my condolences to the community of Pimville and to the family of Khomotso Diale, who was killed in conflict over resources, over allegedly the stealing of a power cable. So this has actually led to intense conflict between those living in this informal settlement, to the extent that when people marched with members of Operation Dudula, and also, it seems, claiming that these are foreigners, we need to rid them of the crime. A similar thing unfolded as it did in Deep Sloot a couple of weeks ago, when Operation Dudula had come the day before, and then the following day, a resident was killed. May his soul rest in peace. Elvis Inyati was killed by people claiming that, in a similar process, claiming that there was crime being inflicted, but this person had actually done no crime. In fact, his only crime was being Black and Zimbabwean. And in this case, what happened was that the people who were involved trying to get their cables back from Cliptown, they actually left their area and they went on a march. These are the reports that we're getting from residents, and it also confirmed in different stories. They went on a march, and when they got to Cliptown, people were shot at. And one person, Khomotso Diale, was actually killed.
Yeah, sorry, Prof.
So that's just the background of the story.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you, but for time purposes, let's just maybe get into another issue that many of these communities and townships face with regards to cable theft, before we get into the issue of actually having access to electricity, because we know a lot of the time there are issues of payments and people's electricity gets cut off. Maybe speak to us about the issue of cable theft and how that also exacerbates the electricity crisis in many of these areas. What are you finding in your research with regards to that?
We're finding that cable theft undeniably and definitely does play a role in making it more difficult for people, especially living in Black townships and informal settlements, to access electricity, but that it's only one factor amongst many that ESCOM is pointing out, and also that are causing people to not have access. Including the fact that electricity has actually increased by 4 times over the last 10 years. Also, another factor is that corporations like Anglo pay about 10 times less than residents in Black townships and elsewhere, and in Black townships where people are getting paid obviously less money than they might be getting in a suburb. The other thing that the story of cable theft misses out on or fails to acknowledge is that this is not the major source. actually of people not being able to access electricity. There's also load reduction. So that's the punishment basically by ESCOM when it determines that this particular community, and it's always, if I'm not mistaken, every single time it's a Black township that is affected, they will be the ones that are cut off. They are reduced because certain members in their community may not be able to or choose not to pay for their electricity, but it's a blanket effect. So everyone in the entire community will actually now be cut off. We get load shedding as we got over the last few days when we get like a couple hours or 4 hours, but load reduction is targeting specific Black working class communities who are not fighting back. And then obviously it's exacerbated as well by the cable theft that is occurring, and that is creating intense stress within communities. And in this case, Operation Dudula has fanned the fires when it sees what is going on. And then, like it's done elsewhere, where Dudula blames the foreigners, now it's blaming the people, the vulnerable people living in an informal settlement. And then when they went there, Dudula uses this discourse of violence as well. It says we must Dudula these people. Allegedly or apparently, they appeared to have fought back or acted in self-defense, which led
sorry to interject. I've completely run out of time, but if you can maybe just briefly answer me with regards to some kind of solution or who the message needs to get to in government to allow these areas to have access to electricity. We've covered this story time and time again, and it seems as though we're just constantly talking about it, but nobody's really listening to the solutions and action plan of how to deal with the electricity crisis that we are facing in the country.
The key thing is that now there is people blaming each other. There is actually, because we blame, for example, the people in Pimville were blaming the people in Cliptown this past week for stealing the electricity cables, but we're not sure who actually did that. It's alleged. So there's some blaming amongst people that is actually targeting. It ends up leading to Black-on-Black violence. So instead of blaming the people living in townships, many of whom have been actually the victims of load reduction and cannot access electricity, we need to target ESCOM and prevent load reduction in low-income areas to reduce the stress on people who are of low income in Black townships.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your insight. We do appreciate it. I think this is a massive issue that needs much attention, but also an action plan, because it just seems as though there is no solution in sight here.